Okay, so moving on to the talk now. Well, you hopefully remember that we're in a series now, which is called Light in the Dark. And it's a series that's looking at Buddhist tools when life is difficult and challenging. If we lead our lives in the way that we've been taught, in a samsaric way. So that means that we go round and round in those same cycles of habits, grasping at pleasure, pushing away, trying to avoid suffering. Well, actually, it won't work. All the time, we're trying to make things right so that we can find happiness. But, well, life always breaks its promises. So something will always happen that is challenging. Life won't do what we want. But the Dharma gives us tools, a whole range of tools to cope with this. And in this series, we're exploring those. So we've had a look at the wisdom approach. We're now in the heroic approach. Coming up next week is the compassionate approach with an outside speaker. Is that right, next week? Or is that? Yeah? Yeah. So someone who lives at a retreat centre, Padmasagara, who's a really great speaker, is coming next week. So really worth coming to that. And also we're going to finish with the hardcore or hardline approach, which I'm looking forward to. But we're in the heroic approach now, the second part of that, of the two talks on that. So last week we had that very helpful, very beautiful talk from Bodhinaga on Kshanti, which is forbearance, patience, when life doesn't go the way we want it to. And actually, to have forbearance, to have patience, often takes a lot of energy, a lot of courage to do, a lot of heart. And that's the aspect that I'm talking about tonight. I'm talking about energy. Virya, the word is Virya, V-I-R-Y-A, which I'm going to try and remember to use, because actually it's got a specific meaning. We call it energy, but it's got a specific meaning. So Virya, the word, is connected with the words virtuous and virile. Sometimes it's translated as ardor, so it's got a sense of energy about it. And Sangha translates it as energy for the good. So it's energy that's that's for the good. And the title of this talk is Attacking Difficulty, or on the attack, something like that. Oh yeah, on the attack. And that doesn't sound very Buddhist at all, actually, that we're attacking things. But in this talk, I'm going to talk about how we can actually use what might sound quite negative, even destructive states of mind to help us to be strong and active, to have energy, particularly in times of difficulty, and how that can help us to act in line with our deepest wishes and principles of developing awareness and kindness and wisdom. So I'm going to start with a real life example, actually, someone who I think really exemplifies Virya and Kshanti. And it's about Amoghavasamsa, who many of you will know, a very beloved member of the Sangha here. He lives in the men's community just through that door. And he's dedicated his life to creating and serving this centre. He was the chair when we got this building. So he's played an incredibly important part in this centre. And if you haven't met him yet, he's really renowned for his friendliness, his openness, his humour and his lightness, his playfulness. So Amoghavasamsa has had some issues with his heart for many years. And on Friday, and he's all right, before I tell you the rest of it, he's all right. But on Friday, he had a heart attack while he was visiting friends in Newcastle. And he's back here and he's recovering well. I think the community are looking after him really well. Apparently he was talking to people all morning. But on Friday, it looked pretty serious on Friday night. And a friend of his called a Cooper who was with him, who lives in Newcastle, sent out an email. And I thought I'd just read an excerpt from it because I found it very moving. So it says, Amoghavasamsa started to feel shivery and had some chest pain while at Prasiddhi's yesterday evening. He asked to come back to my place, so Prasiddhi dropped him off. He went straight to bed and warmed up, but the chest pain grew steadily worse. He took a couple of squirts of his angina spray. When after a few minutes, neither of those had worked, I called for an ambulance. It took a while to arrive. Meanwhile, the chest pain was becoming really quite severe and he was looking quite ashen. I sat holding his hand for a while. The seriousness of his condition wasn't lost on either of us, but he remained in a state of complete kindness and equanimity. He apologized for being a bother, and he made a joke that if he saw Thich Nhat Hanh, who died on Friday, that he saw Thich Nhat Hanh in the bardo, he'd teach him some meditation. He also turned his mind towards the Metabhavana and started talking generally about people in a very appreciative way. Some first responders came, followed by paramedics, so I stood back and let them get on with it, which took some time. He was still in severe pain. Eventually, they got him up and walked him to the ambulance. He spent quite a lot more time in there while they tried to get a decent ECG reading, while also asking him questions about Buddhism. So, as I said, he was in hospital. I think he had very good treatment there. He came back to Sheffield yesterday and he's resting now. And I think he's doing all right. But for me, that is a real example of Virya, of energy for the good in action. Because even when Amoghavansara was in pain, and it appears like to be facing the possibility of death, he remained in a state of kindness and equanimity. He was joking, practicing the Metabhavana, thinking about the people who were with him, talking to the paramedics about Buddhism. And Amoghavansara has trained his mind over many years. I don't know how many, maybe 50, 45 years, something like. He's trained his mind to be aware, kind, practice generosity, particularly over many years. So I really hope that my practice will help me in this way. I hope that I can have that same Virya, that same energy for the good. And actually also for me, this is heroism. So Virya is very much associated with the archetype of the hero. I think this is heroism at its best. I mean, actually, I am personally very inspired by that traditional archetype of the hero, off on a quest, facing loads of danger and perils, fighting loads of baddies and monsters and getting the jewels or whatever it is, and then winning because you've got the superpowers that you've been working at all that time and all that kind of stuff. I mean, personally, I really like that, but I know it doesn't work for everybody, actually, but it is very common in our films and books. But actually, in our lives, although that's really great and we can do all that, actually, the type of heroism, which is to be kind and aware when we are in pain and afraid, that is the kind of heroism that I guess I am training for. So how do we train? How do we develop that energy for the good? So when we're facing great danger and difficulty, or maybe just kind of monotony and tedium and just not being, not much going on, how can we keep going and not give up? So let's start with an image of energy, which is the Vadra, which is this Vadra. And by magic, I think we will have a picture of a Vadra appearing on the screen. Oh, yes. So hopefully, everybody during your newcomers course might have got had a chance to hold a Vadra. If you haven't, I might just pass it round, actually. I'll start with Anna. I don't know if this is under the COVID. If you could all just do your hands in between. So just a sense of feeling what a Vadra feels like. So the Vadra is about great energy and strength. It's diamond-like, which means that it can cut through everything without being cut itself. And like a thunderbolt, it's full of power. And a thunderbolt, I realized that I heard this loads when I first came to the Buddhist Centre, and I didn't really know what it was, actually. A thunderbolt is both that flash of lightning that you get and the sound of the thunder at the same time. So it's that real sense of power. And apparently Harry Potter, people who like Harry Potter, has a thunderbolt on his forehead. So it's kind of image of power, of strength. Lightning when accompanied by a loud thunderclap. So the Vadra is a very powerful symbol, and it comes from warfare. It comes from weapons that were used in India, and it represents like an infallible weapon which never misses, always destroys its target, and then returns to our hand. So it's kind of like a magic weapon. And I think bringing one to mind can really, holding one can be really helpful when I do feel a bit flat, feel scared, uninspired. There's something about the weight of the Vadra that's I find really helpful. So now there's a figure called Vadrapani, who is the figure that holds the Vadra. And I think dwelling a little bit on that figure will help us also get in touch with the kind of energy I'm talking about. So again, I think an image is going to come up. Okay, so this is Vadrapani. So this is in tantric symbolism. There are a whole number of images that are of the wrathful or angry form. And Well, certainly when I first came across them, I was just really kind of a bit surprised. It didn't really fit with my idea of Buddhism. And also the aesthetic of it didn't really speak to me. But over time, I've come to really understand that actually it's about really getting in touch with certain energies. So it's an archetype, an icon of transformed aggression, how we can use aggression to help us on the spiritual path. So it's interesting how the figure of Vadrapani developed. In the very early text, Buddhist texts, the Pali Canon, he's there as a big, fierce yaksha, it's called. It's kind of a local deity, a bit like a big, fierce troll. And there's a story that he's like this figure that the Buddha meets someone who's actually won't listen to the Buddha and is really rude to him. And this yaksha, this big figure like that, stands over this person with her kind of club, threatening to break his head open if he doesn't try and pay attention to what the Buddha's saying. And of course he doesn't, but there's something there, I think it's always really archetypal as well, that it's going to break the head open of someone who's quite arrogant and rude. So that was the first way that these figures, this wrathful figure was presented. And then over time, he developed into an archetypal bodhisattva and Buddha, who's the embodiment of spiritual energy and power. And last week, we met Akshobhya. Bodhinaga introduced us to Akshobhya, connected with Kshanti. And this figure of Vadrapani is also from the Vadra family. So he's got strength, power. The animal he's associated with is the elephant. He's a protector. We could have a picture of him again. So he's been described, I quite like this, as being like a bull in the china shop of samsara, smashing illusions and self-deceptions with a great crashing sound. I'm going to say that again. Like a bull in the china shop of samsara, smashing illusions and self-deceptions with a great crashing sound. Sometimes we just need someone to hit us over the head, actually. And I think that's that kind of energy that he's got. So he is a mythic hero, a great warrior. He's engaged in a spiritual battle. He's on the side of living beings against the forces of suffering. And maybe also he expresses some spiritual impatience almost, like, come on, break out of samsara, break out of this suffering, stamp out the hatred and craving, stop doing those things that are giving you pain and other people pain. It'd be great to have him back just again, please. So what we can do is we can perhaps, if it works for us, imagine ourselves as this figure. So we're stamping to the right. He's actually standing on a huge sun disk supported by a throne. He's wearing a tiger skin. So that's that kind of energy. And he's got a great garland of human skulls around his neck. I'm not sure if he has actually. Anyway, some versions of him do have. And he's unshakable. And in his hand, at the very top, he's holding a Vadra. He's holding one of these Vadra. It's a golden Vadra, and he's prepared to hurl it where it's needed. And around him are these cracking flames, these tantric energies, this wild and free energy. So I think if it works for us, imagining ourselves perhaps as this figure, we can start to contact our own strength, our own heroism, our own energy and power, and the freedom that it brings. And actually, sometimes that can be quite terrifying, terrifying to ourselves as we get in touch with the power that we might have, the agency that we might have in the world, what we might be able to do, and unsettling to others as well, because we will be changing, we'll be becoming bigger people. We might have had conditioning about being small, not being powerful. And the more that we practice the Dharma, actually, the more powerful beings we will become. So to help us understand Virya, I'm just going to say a little bit about what it isn't. So one near enemy. So a near enemy is something that sort of seems a bit like it, but actually is not it. Well, it's rushing about, being very, very active all the time. And it's obviously a very modern thing to do that, but it must have been around hundreds of years ago as well, because a Tibetan teacher called Gampopa described this activity of politics, of business as laziness. And it's lazy because we're not aware. I mean, I think you could be active in politics, perhaps you could be active in business, but if you had a sense of awareness of what you were doing, that wouldn't be laziness. But it's that rushing about, just trying to do stuff, feeling very active. It can both hype us up and it dulls us down, I think. It's a way of escaping quite often from our own experience, this kind of modern thing about, I do this, then I do that, then I do that, that kind of filling up your diary thing. And it overstimulates us and it leaves us feeling exhausted. So, that kind of feeling you might have if you've been rushing around all day, particularly if you work, trying to achieve things. And then in the evening, all you can do is watch the telly or watch something on Netflix or something like that, because you just don't have any energy. You've done a kind of boom and bust thing. Your energy is very hectic, and then you've lost the energy. And, someone might not look at all active in the worldly sense. They might be living very quietly. They might be reflecting, meditating, but actually they might have a lot of energy for the good because they're very aware, very present, really working on their mental states, full of kindness. Yeah, so that's an idea of what Virya, this energy for the good does not mean doing loads of things necessarily. So a really good place to find out more about Virya is the Bodhicharya Avatara, which some of you will have come across. Bodhinaga mentioned it last week. It's this wonderful Indian medieval guide to becoming a bodhisattva. A bodhisattva, a being who's intent on enlightenment for the sake of all beings, who wants all beings to have the fullest happiness. And this is a guide to how to do it. And in that guide, Shantideva, who wrote it, says, so what is Virya? It is making an energetic effort to cultivate what is skillful. What are its enemies? Laziness, attachment to what is unskillful, discouragement, and low self-esteem. So translating that into kind of my words, it's like laziness is, well, we just can't be bothered. That's the thing. Attachment to what is unskillful is, well, we're very attached to unhelpful behaviors in a neurotic and addictive way. So probably, I'm sure all of us have got things that we do that we know don't actually help us, whether that's staying up late at night when actually it'd be better to get a good night's sleep, or smoking or drinking too much or turning to food. There's all sorts of, ways that we behave that don't help us. And yet we are so attached to it, it's really difficult to give it up. So that's attachment to what is unskillful. Discouragement is where we give up really easily when things don't go our way immediately. And I wonder if that's harder in the modern age. I don't know, because you kind of have more immediate results more often. So it might be a little bit harder when things don't work for us straight away to keep going with it. And then low self-esteem. Well, it's when we don't think that we're up for it, actually. We don't think that we can do this. We don't think that we can overcome this difficulty. We don't think that we can practice in a particular way. So, what can we do to develop this capacities that will help us develop Virya, that will overcome these? And Shantideva says, well, they are pride, desire, delight, perseverance, and letting go or resting. Now, there's loads in there, and I had to cut loads out of this talk, to be honest, and I'm not going to go through all of those. What I thought I'd do is I'm going to concentrate on what might seem, I think Mogavans has given me permission to talk about it, which is a good thing, seeing as I did. He was just at the door at the back. Or maybe he was just telling us he's all right. Anyway, he had his thumbs up, so that's a good sign. So there's lots in there. I'm not going to cover it all, but there are loads of talks online about Virya. If you're interested in it more, you can look up on Free Buddhist Audio on the Sheffield Buddhist Centre website. But I thought I was very interested in actually what might seem the more kind of counterproductive or counterintuitive ways of developing Virya, which are pride, desire, and resting. So, so all these are about, particularly pride and desire, is about transforming the energy of unhelpful, unskillful emotions to help with Virya, to help with our energy. So we're awakening our energy, trying to refine our energy. We're not suppressing it. And I think sometimes Buddhism can seem like we've got to kind of keep all these types, anger, craving down, and this is about a way that we can actually transform them and and those emotions can help us and give us energy. So I'm going to start with pride. So pride is, I guess, when we think we compare ourselves to other people and we think we're better. And we really quite enjoy that fact. And so we compare ourselves and we think, oh, well, I'm better than them. And I suppose there's also a kind of pride, which is like, I'm worse than them as well. But I'm concentrating on the type of pride, which is like, I'm better than them. And we might use it to put other people down, even if it's just in our heads. And also we might become prickly and defensive if we feel like our pride is being challenged. You know, when something happens, you think, oh, that's not right, because I'm not that kind of person they just said I was, or something like that. So pride's not skillful at all in those ways. But actually, we can use pride to help us to develop the virya to keep going when things are tough. And some of these are traditional. Like a traditional one is that we might have a healthy pride, a Buddha pride. A Buddha pride, which is if that we have decided we're going to call ourselves Buddhists, or we're practicing Buddhism, well, we don't want to let down the Buddha. We don't want to be that person at work there going, oh, she says she's a Buddhist, but did you see when she, I don't know, lost her temper last week or ate all the chocolate biscuits or whatever it is? I mean, hopefully those, you know, anyway, do you know what I mean? We might think, especially if you started coming here, actually, people might go, oh, so you're going to the Buddhist Centre and is it having an effect on you? And there might be a way in which we think, actually, I want to have that Buddha pride. I don't want to let my family down. I don't want to let my friends down. And I want to behave in an ethical way. I don't want to act unethically because of that. So that's a traditional one. One that isn't maybe traditional. Some of these are just ones that I realize that I appreciate. There's a pride of being kind of countercultural, actually, counter mainstream cultural. So practicing as a Buddhist in this mainstream consumer culture is quite a minority pursuit. And people sometimes think it's a bit weird, actually. And so living in a way where I'm not looking for the next consumer item to give me happiness, nor the next hit of dopamine for my kind of meaning in life, where I'm trying to develop putting other people in front of me sometimes, seeing other people as important as me, not seeing myself as the center of the world. All those kind of things are quite countercultural, but actually I'm really proud of them. And I think it's, I'm really proud of living in a way that is not buying into some of the mainstream ideas about greed is good and things like that. Yeah, and when things are hard, when I can feel a bit on my own, you know, I can think, no, it's really great that I'm doing it, actually. I feel proud in it, and that keeps me going. Another thing I can be proud of is a kind of my own heroism, I guess, because it's time consuming and challenging to become a bigger person, to have this spiritual heroism, daring to face our demons, our own projected power, you could say. It actually takes quite a lot of energy, and what a fantastic ideal, though. I love that ideal, and I'm really proud that of me and other people who do that, actually, who take that challenge with their lives. I'm also really proud that to my best that I can, I serve the Bodhisattva ideal. This is this idea, this huge, completely crazy idea that I'm going to gain enlightenment for the sake of all living beings, however billions, billions, billions of them, that all of us together are going towards enlightenment. So obviously I can't do that on my own. The idea that I could is a bit crazy, but there's something about it that's really exciting and could perhaps be like the most sublime, the highest undertaking that any of us could do. So why do less with my precious human life? Why not be proud of my human life and spend it in the best way that I think I can? So then another way that I'm proud, well, actually, this is a pride that I don't want somebody else necessarily to do it. So the world needs saving. Lots of suffering going on, lots of sentient beings. I've come across some tools that can really help the world not suffer. Why leave that to others? Why go, oh, how great, there are these great tools, but I don't think I'll bother. It's like, there's a sense of pride there that I want to do that, And then a traditional one from the Bodhicharyavatara, there's a verse that says, I shall make difficulty for difficulty, I must conquer everything. And I just think, well, why not give it a go? So pride, the way that we can use a very positive sense of pride to give us energy, to keep us going, to overcome difficulties. So the second area of energy that we can get on board is desire. So desire, when desire is defined as the craving for sensual pleasures, it can lead us into all sorts of messes. Under the influence of desire, we can be very unaware, really caught up in what we want, and we can behave quite unkindly to others and ourselves and actually do real harm in the world. So desire is not skillful. The desire, craving for sensual pleasures is not skillful, but humans are creatures of desire. It's what gets us going, what kind of gets us up in the morning is we want things. So we need to have skillful desire in our lives. We need to have what's called Dharma Chandra, or desire for the Dharma. And we need to have skillful pleasure as well. Because if we try and kind of become really like bland and kind of have no desire, no wishes, well, we're just like bloodless, I think. It's something like we couldn't keep going either. I think it would end in tears if that's how we tried to live. And by that, I mean two things. One is that we would be very kind of weak and bland. And the second is actually that all those suppressed desires, I hate to think where they might go, actually. So I think there's something about we need to know that we are creatures of desire, and we need to put our desire into things that are skillful and that we enjoy. And if we don't, we're just going to give up when things are hard and revert to less skillful pleasures. So the Bodhicharyavatara is very strong in this. It doesn't really hold its punches. It says, one should be addicted solely to the task that one is undertaking. One should be intoxicated by that task, insatiable, like someone hankering for pleasure and the fruit of love play. So if we really want to have the energy for the good, we need to have an ability to overcome difficulties. We need our spiritual lives to be as intoxicating, as pleasurable as possible, in ethical ways, of course, completely in ethical ways. So we need to look for skillful pleasure and to use that energy of wanting it. So we need to think, what are we inspired by actually, and where do we find pleasure? So as you heard when I talked about Amoghavansara, I'm really inspired by certain people. I'm inspired by his practice and his kindness, and many other people here and in the wider world as well. Really inspired when people behave kindly and generously. So I want to train my mind so that I, as much as possible, automatically do that as well. I find sometimes, particularly on retreat, I can find meditating really rewarding, really beautiful, very nourishing. So that's very inspiring to me, the fact that in meditation I can find, well, just a real depth of pleasure, actually, not always, of course, but in the right conditions, it can be so nourishing. I find pleasure in ritual, doing ritual together, so I really enjoy doing that. I find pleasure in this community. So spending time with this community of people is really pleasurable for me. In communication, in friendship. So there's lots of ways that I find pleasure. And I think it's really important that we know what those are and that we're very happy to seek them out, actually, and to really enjoy them, to enjoy. If you enjoy meditating, really enjoy it. If you enjoy having a good communication with somebody, really enjoy it, because that will really inspire us. And actually, of course, things are hard. Like I was thinking sometimes when I'm meditating, I can go through a long period of it being quite difficult or quite boring. And sometimes when you're on retreat, difficult things come up as well when you're meditating and when you're in silence. But because I know that it's worthwhile in the end, that will keep me going. Do you see what I mean? It's like I'm aiming for something that gives me that strength to keep going. Yeah, so another take on this, I guess, is that often if we really want to do something, we're often prepared to undergo loads of suffering. So people will move continents, won't they? I mean, I've got a few friends who've moved to the United States or to Australia to be with someone they're in love with. And they'll bear loads of difficulties, like, go to a place where they don't have any friends, they have to get a new job because they're really in love. They really want to be with that person. And in a lesser way, many of the activities we do for pleasure actually include difficulties. So I love wild swimming, though not in the winter, actually. I am not that hard. But even in the summer, the water's cold. It's just a lot of faff getting changed. I'm like, oh, I don't want to do it. And as soon as I get in, I'm like, oh, wow, this is amazing, and I must do this every day kind of feeling. But you know what I mean? It's like, I am prepared to overcome those difficulties, those small difficulties, so that I can do something I can enjoy. And you've probably all got your own versions of it, whether that's going running, you know, those first 5-10 minutes when you're running, which is just really boring until you get into it. Going out walking in the hills, and there's a bit we have to walk up the hill. It's really difficult. Yeah, I was even thinking like people who go out clubbing and drinking and taking loads of drugs, well, they have to handle the hangover afterwards, you know, and they're prepared to do that. So there's like a lot of ways that whatever it is where we find our pleasure, we're willing to put up with quite a lot of suffering. And maybe we can remember that next time it's a cold morning and we're thinking, oh, I don't want to meditate. Or you're thinking, oh, I don't really want to go to the center today. I don't want to have that conversation with somebody. Whatever it is that you're thinking you don't want to do, you could think, oh, I wonder if I could overcome a little bit of difficulty for the spiritual pleasure that will come out of it, the benefit that will come out of it. So that's a little bit on how we can use work with desire to help us develop virya. And then the last one I'm just going to talk about today is rest. So in the Bodhicharya Avatara, Shantideva says, when our energy begins to flag, we should put our task aside in order to re-engage with it later. When the job is completely finished, we should leave it and look eagerly for the next and then the next. So it's important to rest. And actually, for some of us, that's fine. Some of us who are more driven, we might feel like it's not okay for us to rest, actually. And if we don't rest properly, then we can't have virya for what we want to do. There's a retreat centre I sometimes go to in Wales, and I love the fact that when you know, everyone turns up there really tired, and they go, don't worry for the first few days. Don't even come to the morning meditation if you're tired. Wait until you're okay. And actually, that's kind of counter my way of thinking, which is like, be there, do it kind of thing. But actually, I get into the meditation much more because of that introduction into it, that I'm rested when I do it. So there's something about daring to rest, be countercultural and rest sometimes, so that then we can have more virya for what we want to do. Yeah, and followed on from that verse, there's that lovely verse which I've talked about before, which is the idea that when we are in our full energy, in our virya, we're like elephants plunging into lotus pools, like baby elephants who love playing in the lotus pools, jumping in the water, squirting all the water all over each other. And it's a bit like our energy can be like that. Yeah. So to end, so one way that we can attack our difficulties is by transforming unskillful energy into something that helps us. We don't suppress the energy, we gradually transform it so that we become powerful and liberated forces of energy for good in the world. We can seize the Vadra and hold it high and enter the spiritual battleground, transforming the enemies of greed, hatred, and delusion, the enemies that are greed, hatred, and delusion into love, awareness, wisdom, and energy.